AIDS brings a response
Fight
from the
against
government.
AIDS, the disease which claims life.
Welcome to AIDS The Lost Voices with me, William Hampson. In this series, we journey through the decades to explore how Britain reported on the AIDS pandemic. We'll delve into the newspaper archives from the 80s, 90s and noughties, unearthing individual stories that reveal the human experiences behind the headlines. Join me as we seek to understand the complexities of a crisis that reshaped lives and challenged societal perceptions. Ready? Let's go.
Hello, remember me, Leigh Bowery? Would you like to come into my dressing room? Rather than, say, do a painting on canvas or sculpting with clay, I put all these ideas onto myself.
Why do you do it? Do you go out to shock? Is that a deliberate attempt, shock?
I certainly hope to stimulate people.
Right.
And if they're shocked, that's fine as well.
Right.
And I think it's because, the audience seem to be such a dreary, unimaginative crowd that they find making money so
Why do I want to provoke? I might have to get back to my parents on this point. My parents, unfortunately, belong to the Salvation Army in Australia. And they're very, very sort of ordinary and very sort of orthodox sort of people. My mother's especially religious, and my father is, after meeting her. And my sister as well. All three, oddly enough, are social workers. Isn't that a bit of a paradox in itself? So maybe that's got something to do with it. Maybe I've got a special problem.
Leigh Bowery was born on the 26th of March 1961 in a suburb of Melbourne, Australia, to parents Thomas and Evelyn Bowery. Leigh rose to prominence as a performance artist, club promoter and fashion designer, known for his provocative and imaginative work. Bowery's performances were marked by striking costumes and elaborate makeup, blending conceptual artistry with flamboyance and outlandishness. Leigh's approach was often controversial, challenging conventional ideas of identity and aesthetics, and leaving a lasting impact on the worlds of fashion and performance art. But before all that, the very first article I could find included a photograph of an 8-year-old Leigh Bowery in Australia's The Age newspaper, published on the 9th of October 1969 under the headline, "Looking at Nature," with a close-up photo of Leigh with a lizard on his nose, where the article states, "Leaping lizards! You can't blame an 8-year-old for looking like this when one of these is crawling down his face, and a three-tailed one at that. The young fellow with the big eyes is Leigh Bowery, whose auntie Mrs. N. Griffiths of Morris Street, Sunshine, found the lizard yesterday in the woodpile. Said Mrs. Griffiths, quote, I'd never seen a lizard with more than one tail before, so I decided to ring The Age, the newspaper. Our nature writer, Norman Wakefield, says the lizard is a gecko, which isn't often found this far south, but he says it isn't rare to find a gecko with more than one tail. Quote, I've seen one with 7, he said. Oh, and such a cute photograph. Remember, you can catch these photos and all these articles on the Extra T blog. Link is in the show notes. From an early age, Bowery immersed himself in music, mastering the piano before shifting his focus to fashion and design at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. After a year of study, driven by a restless desire to explore new horizons, Bowery relocated to London in 1980. Famously remarking, quote, I was so itchy to see new things and to see the world that I just left, end quote. This move marked the beginning of his influential presence in the creative and cultural scenes of the city. The next article I could find of Bowery in the press archives was here in the UK, where on the 26th of April 1983, London's Evening Standard reports on Leigh Bowery, a young fashion designer, showcasing his designs in New York City. Alongside a photograph of Leigh and fellow designer and friend Rachel Auburn, they ran the headline, What a Scream in New York, with the strapline, How London's Young Designers Took Manhattan by Surprise, where the article states. Screams were heard on the New York subway last week, not another mugging, but a couple of young British designers on their first trip to Manhattan unwittingly terrorising some local kids with their London clothes and hairstyles. And it was with shrieks of delight, thankfully, that the fashion alert audience at the Roxy Roller Rink responded to the New London in New York show on Friday evening. Everyone was keyed up and dressed up to witness new wave fashion symbolised by 24 young British designers. The show was planned by Suzanne Barge, who runs a shop in Soho, Manhattan, devoted exclusively to offbeat London designers. She enjoys the uneasy stares from New Yorkers as she steps out of her apartment in the Chelsea Hotel, a dramatic Stephen Jones hat pulled on low over scarlet lips, Andrew Logan's mirrored brooch pinned onto a patch Rachel Auburn sweater. Then, later that year on October the 14th, 1983, London's Evening Standard gives us an insight into the Leigh Bowery we all came to know that weren't within his inner circle, where they ran the headline, "Show a leg, men," where they report, "Men of London, where is your sense of adventure?" Fashion designer Leigh Bowery tells me he's having trouble selling his newest line in gentswear, lycra and lame tights. The tights, modelled above, cost £5 a pair and are part of Leigh's autumn look, which is a mixture of 70s glitter, supernatural symbols and platform shoes. Quote, "But the tights aren't selling at the moment," sighs Leigh, who comes from Australia where men are men, except for Dame Edna. Quote, "My friends and I wear them and they are very warm at this time of year." No, stop it. I went into a little bit of Leigh Bowery at the end there. They're trying to make me do an impression of Leigh, because I started, when we did the read through, I started to kind of talk. When you've heard his voice quite often, it's like an unconscious thing that you try. Okay, they're telling me to just do it, but I'm going to get absolutely crucified for this, but because I don't think it sounds like him at all. But anyway, here goes. "My friends and I wear them and they are very warm at this time of year." It's horrendous. Cut that out, don't put that in. Leigh sells his styles through Academy in the King's Road and also exports them to New York, where men obviously don't mind showing off their legs. Says plucky Leigh, quote, "My clothes can be worn by anyone, men or women. I started using glitter because I wanted something bold and exciting," end quote. Sadly, a straw poll of the ad-lib desk reveals that tights won't replace Marks & Spencer's socks, and I was so looking forward to hearing, quote, "I've just laddered my tights," end quote, in a deep bass voice. By the following year, 1984, Leigh Bowery was starting to become a significant figure in both the London and British press, with whispers and commentary beginning to surface across the Atlantic in the United States. Leigh's larger-than-life persona, marking a period when Leigh's name began to dominate the gossip columns, this burgeoning notoriety not only captured the attention of journalists, with one of many examples from the Fort Worth Star newspaper in Texas on the 15th of April 1984, reporting, "London by night. The boys wear rhinestones, the girls wear wedding veils over football t-shirts, and roulette wheels are set out for diversion at little intimate dinners. This is London by night, a gag-a-minute world. Everyone wants a piece of the limelight, but not everybody is equipped to deal with the intensity and ruthlessness that makes the London variety so dangerous. Steve Strange, once an enfant terrible, sits in the corners of dank clubs. Marilyn, who is sometimes mistaken for a woman with street blonde dreadlocks, has made something of a career as a minor singer and is well thought of at the moment. Ready to edge him out is Leigh Bowery, who designs glitter rock clothes, paints his face green and wears a string of beads from ear to nose. On the runway at fashion shows, there is fluorescent lipstick, hair sprouting like a fountain in every direction, and spectators vying with the mannequins in bizarre ready-to-wear. A month or so later, on the 6th of June 1984, the Miami Herald reported on a fashion show in New York City that was anything but ordinary. Now, if you're familiar with Leigh Bowery already, then I need say nothing more, because if you know, you know. The press frantically detailed the extravagant offerings, including shorts crafted from shower curtains, coats made of teddy bear fur, and geometric jewellery fashioned from sex cards that were once posted in London phone boxes. However, it is these kinds of articles where Leigh Bowery is frequently cited, and he must have loved it. And the Miami Herald reports, Gary Pennington, a spokesman for 15 young new London designers, sees nothing particularly strange in their styles. Not in Leigh Bowery's skirts for men, nor his glam rock makeup of purple and yellow lips, eyes and cheeks. Quote, "We don't think we're being unusual," he says. "It's just that we're new." Then, back in the UK press, the Weekly Argos for Caerphilly, Wales, on the 12th of July 1984, we hear of Leigh Bowery's collaboration with close friend and dancer Michael Clark, where the article shares the following insight. Also in the programme is an exclusive preview of some of the latest and most adventurous work of Michael Clarke, who, at only 22, is already being acclaimed in Britain and Europe as one of the most exciting dancer choreographers to emerge in the last 10 years. Michael Clarke studied classical ballet at the Royal Ballet School and joined Ballet Rambert at the age of 17. In August, he launches his own company at the Riverside Studios in London before going on to the Edinburgh Festival. His work has frequently aroused controversy and has created close links with the fashion and rock world, working with such names as Leigh Bowery and David Holer of Body Map and dancing in rock promo videos. And as you can imagine through Michael Clarke's productions, working closely with Leigh Bowery, Leigh is credited in newspapers up and down the UK as costume designer, along with other notable names including Body Map. And one costume drew particular attention and was reported widely, such as in the Hammersmith Gazette on the 9th of August 1984, where the headline reads, "Saucy dancers make daring debut," where they report. Dancer Michael Clarke's company makes a daring debut at Riverside Studios in Hammersmith this week. Choreographer and dancer Michael, 22, pictured right, who has been setting up and running classes and workshops at the studios for 2 years, is doing his first show with his Free Strong company. And included in the costumes, all designed by Leigh Bowery, are some backless trousers, revealing almost all. A spokesman for the studios said, "Everybody here thought the show was stunningly good, but we wondered before the show started how the audience would react. Parts of the show are fairly outrageous." Michael, who lives in Battersea, is a former pupil of the Royal Ballet. He left to join Riverside and has since performed in last year's Dance Umbrella, as well as doing a show with dancer Ellen van Schulenburch earlier this year. He is now set to do work with the Paris Opera Ballet as well as the Scottish Ballet. His current show, which opened last week, is divided into 2 parts. The first part, called Do You Me? I Did, has music by Bruce Gilbert and costumes by Body Map. The second part, called New Puritans, features music by punk-style band The Fall and costumes by superhero look designer Leigh Bowery. Then, by October 1984, Bowery is showcasing his designs amongst several other designers in a stage performance titled Performing Clothes, which is described by Manchester's Evening News as, quote, "Performing Clothes brings together choreography, clothes and music," end quote. Where it ran at Manchester's Hacienda Club after it had a 2-week run at London's Institute of Contemporary Arts. Now, under a large photograph of the models showcasing the designs, the Manchester Evening News reports the more bizarre side of fashion from Australian-born designer Leigh Bowery, who says, quote, "Culture is really quite vulgar," end quote. Fun furs, velour satin, sequins and synthetic fabrics and fake leather and snakeskins feature in his autumn-winter collection.
This is another one of my autumn predictions. It's a beautiful garment which has these rather strong satin flowers swimming in a sea of sequins. And I've teamed this outfit with sequin gloves and sequin tights.
Then the following month in November, Bowery is in Tokyo, where the Evening Standard on the 27th of November 1984 reported 20 young London designers landed in Tokyo, sponsored by Japanese couturier Hane Mori's Fashion Foundation and courtesy of British Airways. Their reception had been just as rapturous, apart from the bare bottoms revealed in Leigh Bowery's collection of clothes, which were viewed in shocked silence. Fabulous. And you know, there may have been creativity in Bowery's designs rather than perhaps him just wanting to cause shock, but what's genius is the fact that out of the 20 young designers, Bowery's collection is the only one that gets the attention of the journalist. It gets mentioned within the article. So it's smart, no? However, dancer Michael Clarke, a notable figure in contemporary dance, has garnered significant attention across the UK for his innovative productions. Frequently credited in newspapers nationwide, his work is often celebrated alongside the striking costumes designed by his close friend and collaborator, Leigh Bowery. Both equally busy in their respective crafts, with Michael pushing the boundaries of dance, while Bowery's designs enhance the visual narrative of each production. Then comes 1985, a pivotal year where Leigh Bowery truly showcased his creations and, by extension, himself. If there is one word that fans of Leigh Bowery are familiar with, it's taboo. Taboo was a club night held every Thursday at Maximus Club at 14 Leicester Square, London. Within the newspaper archives in February, we learned that the club applied for a cinematography licence to show videos and an extended late licence until 3 a.m. The following month, on the 12th of March 1985, a series of classified ads started appearing seeking, quote, attractive bar staff, end quote. Bowery had joined Tony Gordon in making Thursday night at Maximus taboo, with its opening night on the 14th of March 1985. In a 2008 interview, singer Boy George said of Taboo, quote, the first few weeks were no big deal. Then, suddenly it was the place to be. There were queues outside. In the early 1980s, a concerted effort by the council and police to clean up Soho aimed to eradicate the gangs, sex work and vice that had long defined the area, resulting in a marked decline in the vibrancy for which Soho was renowned. This campaign had a profound impact on the cultural landscape, transforming the atmosphere that had nurtured artistic expression and nightlife. Those who remember the iconic Taboo reflect fondly on its significance, acknowledging that, like its famous guest Boy George, it took time for the venue to gain traction. Ultimately, it was the press attention, spearheaded by individuals like Leigh Bowery, that catapulted Taboo into the limelight, highlighting the complex interplay between the area's historical grit and Bowery's ever-evolving creative revolution. Now, one of the earliest mentions of Taboo I could find in the press archives was that of The Observer on the 29th of September 1985. They ran an article about the changes in Soho, particularly around the elusive 100 and the ubiquitous 1000, where they shared the following insight. The elusive 100 set the trends, which the ubiquitous 1000 and eventually the rest of the country will follow. Wherever they go, whether to cafes or nightclubs, they never have to pay for anything. At the Taboo Club in Leicester Square, for instance, they are all on Leigh Bowery's conga, the elusive 100's word for the host's guest list, which guarantees free entry. The elusive 100 never have to pay because they are princes of the city. You can trace the origins of the elusive 100's love affair with Soho back to Billy's, a small gay club on Mead Street, in 1978. For on Tuesdays at Billy's, Steve Strange hosted Bowie Night, and Steve Strange is the Christopher Columbus of West Wonderland. And on my recent visit to the Leigh Bowery exhibition at the Tate Modern in London, which ends on the 31st of August 2025, they quote Time Out magazine as describing Taboo as, quote, the most fashionable place to see and be seen is Taboo on Thursday. The policy is simple. Dress as though your life depends on it, or don't bother. And the Tate Modern exhibition also said of Bowery, quote, London's nightclubs became the catwalk for his creations. It, Taboo, soon became known as London's sleaziest, campest and bitchiest club of the moment. On the door, Mark Voltier would hold a hand mirror up to badly dressed punters and ask, would you let yourself in? And the Leigh Bowery exhibition at the Tate Modern showcases a captivating array of photographs from Taboo, complemented by a selection of Bowery's most outrageous outfits, which encapsulate his bold-fashioned statements of the time. Accompanying these visual pieces are a couple of heavily soiled guest lists from the door of Taboo. And one regular guest to Taboo on the 9th of October 1985, Anne McNair Wilson, daughter of an MP, tells the Evening Standard that Taboo is one of her places to be seen on a Thursday night. Then, on New Year's Eve 1985, London's Evening Standard newspaper reports, New Year's Eve party for London's trendiest club crowd, hosted by Taboo's Leigh Bowery and DJ Fat Tony, includes cabaret acts and surprise megastar. Tickets were £7 and the event was held at the Piccadilly Theatre London until 3 a.m. Then, the following year, in April 1986, Bowery garnered attention by being featured in the documentary series South of Watford, which explored the vibrant life and artistic scene of London. During this episode, presenter Hugh Laurie met Bowery, offering viewers an intimate glimpse into the creative mind of Leigh Bowery. Airing at 11 p.m. on ITV on the 26th of April 1986, the programme captured the essence of the time, highlighting the dynamic and sometimes gritty reality of Leigh Bowery's world, along with the broader cultural landscape that defined London in the 1980s.
A few years ago, London Fashion Week was a haphazard, even amateurish affair. But these days, it's a multimedia event, with the attention of the world focused on British designers, some of whom have made their reputations by picking up on what's happening on the street. But recently, the inspiration behind street styles has dried up, and as a consequence, fashion has become more mainstream. This has left the likes of Leigh even more out on a limb.
Yeah, I think I have, actually. Oh, Victoria, hi, love. How are you keeping, darling?
Sometimes I think I am a distraction, but sometimes people sort of think, that's a lovely novelty over there, isn't it? It's sort of like a weird person who really doesn't make the grade in terms of fashion production and sort of organisation, but it still turns up at the shows. It's gorgeous, really. It's sort of a bit of a non-entity, but I'm going to snap him it anyway. Snap him up with my camera.
Then, 2 months later, on the 26th of June 1986, London's Evening Standard ran the headline, "Police Enforce Taboo," where they report. The revelations of a Fleet Street colleague in a Sunday colour magazine have, sadly, closed down the extremely popular Taboo Club, which was held on Thursday nights in Leicester Square's Maximus Disco. At one point in his article, the writer mentioned the smell of marijuana permeating the air and ecstasy being the drug of the night. The police read it and told the owners of Maximus that if they wanted to keep their busy premises open all week, Taboo had to go. Quote, "We were warned about drugs by the police on a number of occasions in the past," admits Taboo frontman Leigh Bowery. So, that's the end of Taboo. Sad, really. But as one club closes, another one opens, because the following month, on the 23rd of July 1986, Bowery made headlines in the Chicago Tribune. Reporter Marlo Donato, reporting from London, covered the grand opening of the Limelight Club on Shaftesbury Avenue, which had drawn an exclusive crowd of over 1,000 invited guests, where they reported. The uninvited seemed content to watch from the sidelines outside, cheering the arrival of local soap opera stars and pop musicians, as well as the heavy-duty celebrity Hollywood types and rock stars including Jodie Foster, Mel Brooks, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, Bananarama, and members of The Alarm, the Thompson Twins and Spandau Ballet. The biggest cheer went up for Sting, who so excited the crowd that a few only just missed getting hit by passing traffic in the push to get closer to the rocker on his way in. Rod Stewart almost got hit in traffic on his way out as he pushed his way into the street, declaring the photographers and heat was more than he could bear. Oh, and the only photograph the newspaper printed from the event is of Leigh Bowery with a woman named Blue Neon, where the article continues. There were plenty of gothic carnival-like figures floating around too, besides the costumed angels and cherubs who were hired for atmosphere. There were partygoers such as Leigh Bowery, host of the now defunct but once trendy Taboo Club. Bowery, dressed for the occasion in a floor-length white gown, topped off with face paint, one eye covered, and a headpiece that resembled a mutant artichoke. He was chatting in the VIP lounge with a woman dressed in a white t-shirt, floor-length white skirt and floppy black hat, who described herself as, quote, Blue Neon, a not yet but soon-to-be pop star from Transylvania, where all the vampires come from, end quote. The two were last seen mugging for the cameras when Bowery tipped Neon over backwards and the two crashed into a tray of drink glasses. Fabulous. Bowery continues to be heavily cited in the press, particularly in connection with his friend and dancer Michael Clarke, whose career had garnered acclaim through various reviews of his productions within his own company. Bowery is often acknowledged as one of the costume designers for Clarke's shows, or credited for a cameo role in some of his performances. However, some of Bowery's cameos were not always met with enthusiastic praise. A notable example is the review from the Fulham and Hammersmith Chronicle on the 18th of December 1986, where they wrote, quote, cameo roles from Leigh Bowery, Lucy Burge and other well-known artists add interest, but much of the action suffered from a lack of rehearsal and vague direction. At £8 a ticket, I would have felt short-changed if I had to pay to see Hey Luciani, and would advise fans of The Fall to save their money for a future live concert. And the Guardian newspaper on the 12th of December 1986 wrote, the play, or show, or whatever it is, lacks almost everything. None of the actors, including dancer Michael Clarke and elitist extraordinaire Leigh Bowery, can act. Though this doesn't matter, since Smith hasn't written parts for them anyway. All they get is fragments of language which might be dialogue, might be chunks of one of his songs, or could have been pinched from this morning's Daily Mail." End quote. Oh, ouch. But such mixed reviews highlight the complexities of Bowery's role within the vibrant yet critical landscape of performance art. Or is this the point? Was Bowery way ahead of his times and they just simply didn't get it? Anyhow, by February 1987, Bowery is in his native homeland, Australia, where on the 11th of February 1987, Australia's The Age newspaper ran the headline, alongside a large photograph of Bowery, "Night Owl Spreads His Wings," where they report: Leigh Bowery is a rare and exotic nightbird with astonishing plumage, a shade too startling and incredible in the clear, bright light of day. His favoured habitat is the pulsing darkness of London nightclubs. Leigh Bowery pushes the word fashion to the limits of definition. His only statement is, quote, "Look at me," end quote. 7 years ago, when he was 19, Leigh Bowery left sunshine in Melbourne's western suburbs for nightclub land London, hungering for the sort of glamour and attention that keeps a steady stream of starlets arriving in Hollywood. Quote, "I'd had my goals set on London since I was about 16. I'd read different articles about nightclubs in London and so forth. I'd spent 1 year at fashion college at RMIT, but I was so itchy to see the world and see new things that I just left. I got the money together and went to London." He began selling clothes from a stall at a market, which led to contracts in New York and London. Quote, "There was one collection that I did which was all really raggy, and all of the bag ladies and tramps who lived on the street protested because my designs resembled what they were wearing, not through choice, but because of their awful circumstance." End quote. Ironically, the streets people's public outcry had the effect of generating sales. Quote, "All of the stuff went out of the department stores really quickly and we had to restock." End quote. Leigh Bowery became involved in a nightclub which demanded a new outfit every week. Quote, "So the emphasis shifted from me selling clothes to me wearing clothes that I made. The thing about it," his work, "is that it's not too serious. When I look at myself in the mirror before I go out, I often have a good laugh because I'm on the verge of being ridiculous, and that really appeals to me because I think that too many people take fashion seriously. I love the drama in clothing. I love the way that you can put clothes on and it can change the way that you feel about things. Sometimes I can feel nothingish in the daytime and I put clothes on and I feel quite special, as though I have to live up to them almost." End quote. As Leigh Bowery's designs became more bizarre, the focus of his work shifted from retail to theatre, predominantly for English dancer Michael Clarke and company, although Michael is Scottish. His best known and certainly most controversial design exposed Clarke's buttocks. Quote, "It was quite provocative, but it was beautiful as well. It was quite fitted and those fleshy orbs were on show. It was a good focal point for Michael. Everyone seems to have zoomed in on that." End quote. It is this connection that has brought Leigh Bowery home. The Fashion Design Council and Fantastic Entertainment in Public Places, formerly called Free Entertainment in the Parks, are presenting a free fashion show at the Melbourne Town Hall featuring Leigh's designs modelled by members of Michael Clarke's troupe. Garments from the Body Map collection will also be on show. Quote, "Michael and the dancers are choreographing some new pieces for it. It's quite anarchic in lots of ways because I don't really represent fashion all that much. All of the images in the show will be really strong and harsh and defined." Then, back here in London on the 3rd of April 1987, London's Evening Standard run the headline, "Taboo or Not Taboo?" with the strapline, "Taboo, the strangest nightclub for the strangest people, was forcibly closed last year. Now, 2 new hotspots for weirdos have arisen from the ashes, and one is already dubbed Taboo 2. Now, the article shares that, as we heard earlier, Tony Gordon, who invited Bowery to start a club night, has opened 2 others, where, as the headline suggests, Leigh Bowery and Taboo get a mention as follows. Quote, "The existence of both clubs is a tribute to the enigmatic Gordon, who has pulled off a Lazarus back from the dead act. Last summer, Club Squad Cops closed down Taboo, the outrageous nightery he ran with Leigh Bowery after reports of drug taking in the club. Ascension is now held at the same venue on the same day of the week. Already people are calling it Taboo 2, but a police raid earlier this month produced bemusement rather than busts. Quote, I think the imagery changed since Taboo, Gordon says, characteristically enigmatic. Taboo was the place where you picked up someone on the dance floor by throwing your drink over them. Ascension's floor play is different. The vibe is mellower and less aggressive. Taboo had a startlingly high casualty rate. Artist Trojan and doorman Mark Vaultier are just two of the gang who died from lifestyle overdoses. Then, almost a year later, on the 15th of July 1988, the London's Evening Standard newspaper print a photograph of Leigh Bowery in one of his new outfits, with a little update on what it is he is doing these days, where they report. Leigh Bowery, 27, has been clubbing for 8 years. To some of us, it seems like longer. So well known a figure he is on the circuit in his ever-changing roster of gear. Quote, "It must be at least 5 years since I paid to go in. I had colour, a certain je ne sais quoi to the club." End quote. So, where does he get these crazy outfits? Although he no longer designs clothes for commercial production, he has a whole room dedicated to clothes and a team of sequin and embroidery experts at hand. He makes a new outfit, with makeup to match, every week, essential for his weekly MTV chat show. Here we feature his latest metamorphosis, a tasteful ensemble in fashionable, among interior decorators, cruel work fabric covered in jumbo sequins and teamed with lycra leggings and snug fit clumped-heeled booties. What makes this combo so quintessentially Leigh is the matching helmet with skillfully applied toning makeup peeking out. Quote, "It's to do with identity. I pile it all on my back," says the large and colourful Australian. Quote, "I've got so used to turning heads in nightclubs, I'd miss it." End quote. He spreads his glorious self around. This is where you'll find him. Mondays, Spectrum at Heaven, or Fruit at Busby's. Tuesdays, Daisy Chain at the Fridge. Wednesday, Café de Paris. Thursday, Le Homme at Limelight. The Future at the Sanctuary, and a session. Friday, Heaven. Then, in October 1988, the independent newspaper sit down with Bowery to discuss his next project, where on the 1st of October 1988, the independent newspaper titled the interview The Art of Posing, with the strapline, "Leigh Bowery, socialite, public spectacle, and dedicated follower of fashion, made a career out of partygoing before turning himself into an art object," where the article states, "The rapid rise of Leigh Bowery seems the archetypal 80s story, a cheery tale of the fashion victim made good. His fame might be interpreted either as a decorative justification for Tory entrepreneurial ideology, no man could be considered more completely self-made, or as the perfect product of 80s lifestyle thinking, the lazy victory of surface over substance. But since he arrived in London from Australia 8 years ago, his career has resisted such easy praises. The mere fact of his continuing advance suggests that Bowery's brand of crafted freakishness is a strangely enduring one. For Leigh Bowery, fashion designer, socialite, partygoer, public spectacle and former proprietor of the Taboo Club, has refused to become passé. The force of his image and his single-minded spirit have prevented it. When lifestyle turned out to mean no more than printed boxer shorts, Bowery could still be found giving the word some credit. He actually has a lifestyle, conducted in strict accordance with his own aesthetics. Yellow pyjamas, frilly underwear, little policemen's helmets, or a painted black mouth in permanent grimace, and a home decorated with studied excess and garishness. Affable and honourably weird, Bowery has kept the respect of his clubland contemporaries and their relevant media. Remarkably, he has also kept his front teeth. Quote, "I've never been physically attacked," he claims, reclining in full sequin regalia in his East London council flat. "I've had a lot of verbal abuse, but it's never gone beyond that. I guess that's because I'm fairly big." End quote. Bowery's constant and unavoidable nightclub presence has broadened his career opportunities. Quote, "I don't know the destination," he smiles, "but I'm enjoying the journey." End quote. He first met the dancer Michael Clarke when out on the town, and has just appeared in Clarke's most recent production at Sadler's Wells, I Am Curious, Orange. He has also enjoyed a recent 14-week run as co-host of a chat show on the American pop channel MTV. In belated recognition of his services to London nightlife, Bowery has now been officially acknowledged as an art object. Between the 11th and 15th of October, he is to be installed for 2 hours a day behind a two-way mirror in the Anthony de Fair Gallery, the Daring Street showcase usually reserved for better established modern artists. Bowery follows Leon Kossoff. Although not for sale, Bowery will be displayed at the very centre of London's moneyed art world and might therefore stand accused of having been inelegantly seduced by the cultural establishment. Quote, "I don't see it like that," he says. "I'll still be doing what I've been doing all along." End quote. For Bowery has regarded every costume appearance as work. Quote, "I guess I've been working for 6 years fairly solidly, 5 or 6 nights a week, 3 or 4 clubs a night. That's quite a lot of labour, and that's not including the time it takes to prepare myself, days of sewing and so on." End quote. The intention has always been to provoke, and the attraction of settling into a gallery, he argues, lies both in the presence of a fresh audience. Quote, "I don't like always going to places where I know everybody," end quote, and in becoming a new kind of object. Sitting behind glass will be different from standing in the street. Quote, "Even though I'll feel vulnerable, I won't feel nearly so vulnerable. If I'm on the pavement, I end up feeling like a stand-up comic. People say things and I'll be snapping back at them with the same tired old cliched one-liners." End quote. There is tension, he says, in his image, which will be illuminated by the voyeuristic nature of the exhibition arrangement. Quote, "Underneath all this," he explains, acknowledging the sequins, "there is something else. You see something very human and something very non-human at the same time. They don't really merge, they're pulling against each other." End quote. He admits that some acquaintances may be suspicious of his latest venture. Quote, "There'll be people I know from the clubs who will think I'm out of my depth, taking myself more seriously than I ought. But there's also always a certain levity, a self-mocking part to the whole thing." End quote. And in the end, he says with a sanguine air, quote, "If people are laughing at me, that's fine. I invented the joke." Then, a few days later, on the 10th of October 1988, London's Evening Standard sit down with Bowery in an interview, which they titled "The Exhibitionist," where, the article states, Council Block, Whitechapel. The 11th floor apartment sitting room walls are jade green and the floors powder puff pink, but the room's dominated by large slabs of rectangular wall mirror. Enter Leigh Bowery. He lived here for 5 years with Trojan, the artist who overdosed in 1986. Trojan's presence lingers in the flat like the perfume Leigh wears. Quote, "That year was horrible. The inquest was irksome." End quote. People rallied round, the celebritantes anyway. Rachel Alburn, Tony Gordon, Michael Clark, Fiona Russell-Powell, and John Maybury. Leigh Bowery is a 29-year-old Aries from Melbourne who dropped out of his, quote, "crappy old-fashioned course there when he was 18. His father is a social worker, his mother a charity lady, his youngest sister, Bronwyn, a trainee teacher. Quote, "My parents were a little puzzled when they visited last year. They can see I'm happy. I travel a lot. I've visited 50 to 60 countries in the last 4 years. Yeah. I've never been attacked, touch wood. I'm so extreme that I don't threaten people as much as a boy just wearing lipstick. When I go to the shops, I just put on an overcoat over my pyjamas. I get verbal abuse, obviously, but the attention's a byproduct. I'm an artist. I'm not in the business of mass trends. I've been out on my own for 2-3 years now." Leigh's got a big old butt. Quote, "Well, yes, I am quite big, aren't I? It might be one reason why I've never been attacked. I suppose I'm about 6'1", 14 stone." End quote. The masks like Rapeman Leigh, quote, "If people are threatened by the fabric face, well, that's their response, isn't it?" End quote. Or the giant swastika on your bathroom wall. Bet that goes down well with the fashion cares crowd. Quote, someone gave it to me for my birthday." End quote. The first real reaction all afternoon. No more, "I'm a bachelor boy now." No more, "The only thing that worries me is pollution." No more, "People try and categorise me." No more, "interview mode." This is raw emotion. This is Leigh Bowery, celibate, dancer, fashion perpetrator, nightclub scenester, artist, in the raw, and baby, he is squirming. This is the journalist, because it sounds like an arsehole, no? Anyway, Leigh replies, quote, "Not everything in the flat means anything. Someone just gave it to me, that's all. I'm drawn to it in a macabre way. Say what you like about it, but that symbol has deadly power." End quote. Taxi calling. This is where we came in. A factotum opens the door and the fat cockney taxi driver wanders inside. Quote, "Bloody hell," he says, staring around at the hall in wonderment. "This is nice, innit?" Leigh walks out of the workroom. 10 minutes makeup, black body stocking overlaid with purple and gold spangles, fabric face, immaculate white gloves. The air's heavy with Christian Dior. "Fuck me," the driver says, face to face with Leigh Bowery. "You're not coming in the car dressed like that, are you?" "Yes," Leigh says, "I am." Oh, that's probably got to be the worst Cockney accent ever, but you get the idea. It's worse than my Leigh Bowery impression. And on the 12th of October 1988, the Independent newspaper published a photograph taken of Leigh Bowery through the one-way mirror, wearing a green suit with orange polka dots, said to symbolise KS, Kaposi sarcoma, an age-related skin cancer, and which appears in the Tate Modern exhibition, which, remember, is only on until the 31st of August 2025. However, the Independent newspaper captioned their photo, where it states, "Leigh Bowery, a performance artist, seeing a mirror view of himself. Mr. Bowery, 27, has taken his one-man show to the Anthony Defied Gallery in London, where visitors can watch him through a two-way mirror." Surely I think it's a one-way mirror because he can't see out but they can see in, so it's a one-way mirror, no? Through a two-way mirror watching himself. Each day until Saturday, the Australian-born artist who is staging his first exhibition will create a different performance at the gallery in New Bond Street. By May 1989, Bowery is in New York City attending the Love Ball, where Long Island's Newsday newspaper reported on the 12th of May 1989, the hot ticket evening organised by party giver extraordinaire Suzanne Bartsch brought a mix of the downtown fashionable, uptown fashion shakers, and fans and practitioners of the primp and pose dance craze called voguing. The Love Ball was the coming-of-media age for the voguing phenomenon, the mix of runway gymnastics, drag performance, and sheer fashion attitude practiced originally by young gay blacks and Latinos. Now, the article is a fascinating read, especially as the large photo of Leigh Bowery on the catwalk highlights the purpose of the Love Ball, where it reads, "Leigh Bowery, one-time London fashion designer, on the runway at the Love Ball. The benefit raised more than $300,000 for DIFA, Design Industries Foundation for AIDS." And the garment Bowery wore is still on display at the Leigh Bowery exhibition at the Tate Modern until the 31st of August 2025. The following year, on the 30th of May 1990, the Evening Standard reported, "My picture today is of Australian clothes-designing disco freak Leigh Bowery, who, after appearing as a Buddha wearing only gold spray paint and designing bottomless frilly knickers for men, is now modelling for reclusive artist Lucian Freud. Freud's models often appear on the canvas looking rather grotesque, but Bowery, who at 16 stone is a little chubby, has no fears. Quote, I hadn't posed nude before, but it felt very natural, end quote. He tells me in strong Antipodian tones. Quote, but as I have to pose from 7 to 11 a.m, I have cut down on the late night discos, end quote. And Bowery's time spent with Lucian Freud and appearing on the Joan Rivers show in the United States is followed up the following year in an article in the Independent newspaper on the 19th of September 1991, where they ran the headline, soon to be revealed as a man, with the strapline, Leigh Bowery is a walking, talking work of art, but now he has shed his weird attire to sit nude for Lucian Freud. And you can find that article and read it for yourself on the Extra T blog. All About Face, A Life in the Home of Leigh Bowery, was the headline that London's Evening Standard wrote on the 5th of May 1993, where they report from Bowery's council flat, quote, I hate the idea of being responsible for the environment I live in. It seems so precious, claims Leigh Bowery, performance artist and international nightclub face, a rather inappropriate term as he never reveals his own. Quote, I like nice rooms, but I never get round to doing things to the flat. Despite such assurances, his home on the 11th floor of an extremely unprepossessing council block in Stepney could hardly have happened completely by accident. He moved in about 10 years ago, shortly after arriving in London from Australia. He swiftly made his mark on London's nightlife, appearing in ever more wondrous outfits, and, by 1984, was hosting the seminal 80s nightclub Taboo. His constant cohort and flatmate in those days was the painter Trojan, who was far more interested in interior decor than Leigh, and took responsibility for it. Trojan died from a drugs overdose in 1986, and since then Leigh has done little work on the flat. Quote, "Every now and then I'll get a brainwave and try something, but usually it's very short-winded. Things are a bit fragmented." End quote. The wallpaper on the ceiling dates from those early days, a stupendous kitsch black and silver montage of Charlie's Angels type faces. It comes, along with all the other wall coverings, from a local shop which caters for the predominantly Asian community. Quote, "We were amazed at this shop. We used to go in there and roll around the aisles, laughing at all these wallpapers. They still stock the most shocking things." End quote. More recent additions to the living room for which Leigh is responsible are the curtains, which block out a panoramic view of London. They are made from the stitched-together paint rags of Lucian Freud, for whom Leigh has been modelling for the last 3 years. Quote, "I can't bear to throw them away. They are so potential." End quote. The piano was a gift from Michael Clark, the dancer, for whom Leigh designs costumes and in whose shows he appears. Quote, "What I really wanted to do all along." End quote. He studied piano for 10 years back in Australia and still, quote, "messes around," end quote, on it most days. He is currently working his way through Chopin's Preludes. The improbable trampoline was a prop in a show. The improbable trampoline was a prop in a show he did in New York. I'm not going to tell you how many takes it took to read that. Unfortunately, he neglected to rehearse in the giant platforms that were part of his costume, and when he went on stage, he fell off. It now serves as a scratching pad for his cat Kanga, named after Lady Tryon. For someone for whom appearance is such a priority, the only furniture in the room, 2 sofas of dubious attraction, is functional rather than decorative. Quote, "Furniture is a problem. I don't really like the stuff I've got. I don't want to use old furniture, which I have a bit of a soft spot for. I'd rather have something modern, but I never see things I'm crazy about." End quote. A similar moral high-handedness is shown in Leigh's approach to cleaning. Quote, "Whenever I'm feeling depressed or anything, the idea of cleaning to cheer myself up seems like such a cheap trick. Stuff like that is so obvious. It wouldn't do any good." End quote. As he has no natural inclination to tidiness, the flat is usually a mess and only gets the once over when people come round. The flat's primary purpose is storage and a base for which to go out, rather than a nest. Quote, "It's somewhere solid to come back to, where I can have all my stuff." End quote. Most of the stuff consists of Leigh's clothes, which are housed in one of the 3 small bedrooms. More than 10 years' worth of extraordinary outfits hang luridly around the walls. Quote, "Hours of work that will never be reused but never thrown away." End quote. The overflow is already seeping into Leigh's bedroom, where a giant mattress fills the room. Other, quote, "stuff," end quote, books and records, is kept in the 3rd, spare bedroom. The flat could be vastly improved with some structural reorganisation, but... Is this guy a journalist or an estate agent? The flat could be vastly improved with some structural reorganisation, but Leigh cannot really be bothered. Quote, "I don't enjoy painting or papering or any of those things, though I love the results. The great thing would be to pay a decorator to do all the work for me." End quote. Spare cash, however, tends to go towards work projects rather than home improvements. More time is spent out of the flat than in it. Once or twice a month, he goes abroad to grace a nightclub with his presence at a promoter's invitation, thus conferring in status on wherever it is. Quote, "People still think that there's this crazy, wild scene going on in London and they associate it with me." End quote. When in London, he still goes clubbing a couple of times a week, though it used to be more like every day. He always dresses up when he leaves the flat, but has never received any antagonism from the neighbours, who know he is someone vaguely famous. Film crews sporadically turn up at the front door, and thus accept the bizarre apparition coming in and out at all hours. Nor does he find the area, though charmless, depressing. Quote, "I'm very isolated from the neighbourhood once I'm in the flat." End quote. The location has its advantages. The local Asian community provide Leigh with inspiration for much of his work and is very close to Brick Lane, where he buys most of his costume fabric. All Leigh's work centres on his appearance. Quote, I really like the idea of transforming myself and the effect it has, whether the project is a rehearsed show or merely an appearance on a nightclub dance floor. End quote. His flat remains rather more static. Though hardly less unconventional, Leigh was never destined for suburban dreams. Quote, I'd love to have a really fancy bathroom with a power shower and all that, but I hate the idea of having to go to John Lewis. End quote. Oh, what a wonderful insight. The kind of insight that people you take for granted today looking into, well-known, famous celebrity houses, but now we get it in print. Then, as I was making my way through the Leigh Bowery exhibition at the Tate Modern, I learnt that on Friday the 13th of May 1994, Leigh Bowery married his long-time friend Nicola Rainbird in a private ceremony in East London, where the exhibition stated, while he described the marriage as a performance art piece, the decision was partly due to fear he might be deported, as he'd been arrested for having sex in a public toilet at Liverpool Street train station. Then later in the year, on the 27th of November 1993, in the Guardian newspaper, Leigh Bowery answered a series of quick-fire questions. What is your idea of perfect happiness? In the Oliver Mezzel suite at the Dorchester, lying naked on the bed. What is your greatest fear? Pollution. With which historical figure do you most identify? Proust, for being such a great gay role model. Which living person do you most admire? Lucian Freud, for his work. What is the trait you most deplore in yourself? I treat people like Barbie dolls. What is the trait you most deplore in others? The urge to categorise. What vehicles do you own? A brown and green Ford Sierra. Bit of a contradiction on the pollution. What is your greatest extravagance? Occasionally I buy a Big Mac. What objects do you always carry with you? Inhaler, keys and donor card. What makes you most depressed? Betrayal. What do you most dislike about your appearance? Open pores. What is your favourite smell? Dawning mustique. What is your favourite journey? Home from Wormwood Scrubs. What or who is the greatest love of your life? Art. What do you consider the most overrated virtue? Virginity. On what occasions do you lie? On what occasions do I breathe? Which words or phrases do you most overuse? Jesus hates Christ. What is your greatest regret? Unsafe sex with over 1,000 men. When and where were you happiest? Paris, 1968. What single thing would improve the quality of your life? More money. Which talent would you most like to have? Brad Pitt and Marky Mark. What would your motto be? If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. What keeps you awake at night? Randiness, horniness. How would you like to die? By firing squad on stage at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. On the 26th of March 1994, the Observer newspaper reports, brace yourselves, nightclub icon Leigh Bowery is back as ever. Where, they go on to report. 6 months ago, Bowery and long-term friend Richard Torrey started songwriting together. The chemistry worked and they now have a band called Minty. Minty? Quote, it's an old theatrical term for someone who's very offhand. I like it because it's such a fragrant word. End quote. But fragrance is not a primary factor in the band's lyrics. Asked for a sample, Bowery unleashes the staccato verse of Useless Man, a stream of epithets of which only, quote, boot-licking, end quote, is printable here.
Boot-licking, piss-drinking, finger-frigging, tit-tweaking, love-biting, arse-licking, shit-stabbing, motherfucking, spunk-loving, ball-busting, cock-sucking, fist-fucking, lip-smacking, thirst-quenching, cool-living, ever-giving. Useless man.
In a live performance, Useless Man becomes the soundtrack for a routine that summarises Bowery's uncompromising approach to his art. According to an eyewitness, quote, he takes the stage in full drag, wearing this huge tweed coat, looking heavily pregnant. At the song's climax, he reclines on a table and gives birth to this naked girl. She bursts out from between his legs, covered in blood, and she's wearing this skull cap so she looks bald. And I think she had a string of sausages to represent the umbilical cord. Then he pissed in a glass and she drank it." End quote. And the general reaction? Quote, "Oh, shock, definitely." End quote. Quote, "There's humour and a strong aesthetic in our work," says Bowery. "Hopefully it has impact, but it's not always meant to be shocking. Not everything we do is obscene. It's just that the kind of things that stimulate me do have a certain frisson." End quote. With only 3 low-key performances behind them, he and Torry have already aroused interest from record producers, video makers, and the inevitable A&R men, though how they imagine they will take Minty to the masses is anyone's guess. Neither of them is particularly bothered, though Torry cites Derek Jarman's attitude as an inspiration. Quote, "Years ago, Jarman said he wanted to make films that could not be shown on TV, so he did, and now they've all been shown on TV anyway." End quote. Meanwhile, Bowery and Torry will continue to write and perform their bizarre eulogies to sex and alienation. Perhaps the last word on Bowery's power to shock should be left to celebrated art critic Sister Wendy Beckett in her review of Lucien Freud's Oeuvre in the last issue of Modern Painters magazine. Quote, "This power, this union of the beautiful and the terrible, the awe-inspiring, is at its most memorable in the paintings of Leigh Bowery. A giant with a bald head and a round, practically expressionless face, Freud takes fewer liberties with Bowery's flesh than with earlier sitters. It is Bowery himself who grips the imagination, so large, so tangible of flesh, so in command of the site he occupies." End quote. Bowery performed as Minty at Freedom Cafe in Soho on the 24th of November 1994, a performance that seemingly caused quite the stir, where the Evening Standard on the 2nd of December 1994 reported, "Watch out, man, it's the pigs." Westminster Council and the Fuzz combined forces last Friday to ban all performances by experimental art rock band Minty at the Freedom Cafe in Soho. 7 nights were scheduled, 5 were sold out, but only 1 took place. That show apparently contained indecency of the grossest kind and nudity. The group features Leigh Bowery, it must be conceded, but have the police really got nothing better to do than ban a show playing in a small venue in Soho to adults, quote, "in the know," end quote? Pathetic. And the Westminster and Pimlico News followed up on the 8th of December 1994, where they ran the headline, "Shocker Sex Show Shopped in Soho," with the strapline, "Ban on performer who gave birth to naked woman," where they report, "Even by Soho standards, male pregnancy, chocolate, nudity and sex at the back of a cafe are enough to make punters choke on their cappuccino. Upstanding members of the Soho community who dropped into the Freedom Cafe in Wardour Street thought they had stumbled upon a sex show next door rather than a trendy coffee house. At the back of the cafe, which is used as an arts venue, the croissants curled as outrageous performance artist Leigh Bowery, pictured, decked out in a flesh-coloured body stocking, shocked the audience by," and they give a list of bullet points, 1. Giving birth to a stark-naked woman. 2. Simulating oral sex on members of a support band. 3. Pretending to be sick, using instant packet soup. 4. Simulating an illegal sex act. 5. Several other sex acts too obscene to print in a family newspaper. The curtain came down on the show when Westminster Council chiefs were tipped off by a shocked member of the public. But promoter Paul Hitchman is furious about the sleaze slur on the show and has claimed it was all in the best artistic taste. He has even offered to put on a special private performance, complete with simulated sex acts, for council chiefs. He said, quote, "None of the nudity was gratuitous. It was all in the context of an artistic performance. We were told the show contained gross indecency, but that's a bit ironic when a few doors down there's live girly shows going on." End quote. He estimates that stopping the show lost £4,000, but he admits some of the scenes were a little over the top. He added, quote, "But it was very jokily done, and from what I saw at the premiere, everyone was thoroughly enjoying themselves and realised that it was all a bit of fun." End quote. A police spokesman said, quote, "We do not make recommendations, and if the terms of a licence are being breached, we will make objections." Freedom Cafe's joint owner Mark Longthorne said, Quote, "It was nothing compared to what the ICA put on up the road. We're small fry in the outrageous stakes compared to them." End quote. And the Leigh Bowery exhibition at the Tate Modern, on until the 31st of August 2025, gave us an insight into what the birth routine entailed, where they wrote, "Strapped upside down in a harness secured to Bowery's body, Rainbird burst through his costume as he laid back, simulating labour. Rainbird appeared to the audience naked, painted red, and wearing a string of sausages as an umbilical cord." But the exhibition also shared that friends of Bowery believe the call from the concerned member of public reporting the show was indeed Bowery himself, given he was said to have been suffering from headaches related to his AIDS-related illness. Just 37 days after that performance, Leigh Bowery died on the 31st of December 1994, leaving behind a legacy that blended flamboyance with poignant vulnerability, forever altering the landscape of contemporary performance art. One of the many to report on Bowery's death at the age of 33 was London's Evening Standard on the 4th of January 1995, where they reported, "Leigh Bowery, the almost mythical performance artist who for more than a decade adorned London's nightclubs and latterly and even more famously the canvases of Lucian Freud, has died aged 33. Bowery, who was HIV positive, died in hospital of meningitis after a 5-week illness, towards the end of which he developed pneumonia. Born in Melbourne, he arrived in London at the start of the 80s for a life of nightclubbing and dressing up outrageously. Black rubber suits enclosing his whole body, an orange-spotted pyjama suit with matching face paint. He worked as a designer but turned to making costumes for himself and in the mid-80s opened his own nightclub, Taboo. He continued to live in a Stepney council block but appeared in TV commercials and gave art gallery performances. Openly gay since the death of his constant cohort, the painter Trojan, he had lived on his own. With a tragic lack of prophecy, he said a year ago, quote, "If I continue, I will use in my art the wrinkles, the sagging and the drooping that come with age. If people have been shocked now, wait till they see a wrinkly backside." End quote. There were many obituaries over the coming days, and a look back on Bowery's life, including the Independent on the 26th of February 1995, that reflected fondly on Bowery's life. But in his final moments, especially around his HIV/AIDS diagnosis, they reported, Bowery introduced Freud to 2 women, who were also to become his models. One was Sue Tilley, the other was Nicola Bateman, his bride. He and Bateman had met at Taboo, after which she rather pursued him. She was a textile student and she could sew sequins as well as fix the vodkas and cokes, and squeeze Leigh into his corsets. After Trojan's death, Bowery became more and more dependent on her services. Quote, "He realised I was an obedient, faithful person," she says, smiling. It is with surprising cheerfulness that she recalls being locked in the bathroom for hours, or on the balcony. It was Bateman who, in an echo of the divine's childbirth scene in the film Female Trouble, was born from between Bowery's legs in the Minty show, and then drank what the audience was led to believe were his various bodily fluids. Sue Tilley always resisted the pull towards a more submissive role. In hospital, shortly before he died, Bowery said to her, quote, "Susan, we've been very funny kind of friends, haven't we? You know why? It's because I could never properly control you." End quote. When she did sometimes obey him, she would exact a price. Her entire wardrobe, including beautifully tailored work clothes, was made by Bowery in exchange, for example, for a brief display of her breasts as part of the Minty set. Last spring, in the back of a taxi, Bowery proposed marriage to Nicola Bateman and was accepted. Quote, "Nicky," he said, "it'll be a little art performance between the 2 of us." End quote. The ceremony was held in Bow Register Office on Friday the 13th of May. There were 2 witnesses, Seraph Wynne Evans and Nicola's sister Christine. No one else was told. The groom wore his Care in the Community day wear, the bride a turquoise evening dress. She knew, of course, that it was a joke, but you feel she didn't quite know. Quote, "I loved him," she says now, speaking in the shaky bright tones of grief. "And it's every girl's dream to have a diamond ring on her finger." End quote. And the fact of his sexuality? She laughs. Quote, "Well, you know, every relationship has its problems. We had a brilliant relationship together. It was just slightly different from most people's." end quote. A few years ago, to, quote, get a reaction, end quote, Bowery told Nicola Bateman that he had AIDS. She cried all night. In the morning, he told her it was not true, and she believed this retraction. Later, when she and Sue Tilley were sitting together for Lucy and Freud, she told Tilley what Leigh had done. Picture the scene. One of Britain's greatest painters is making something that will sell for about $1 million. In front of him, Tilley is lying on the floor, naked, legs apart. Behind her, clothed and sitting on a chair, is Nicola Bateman, the future wife of Tilley's close friend, a gay man. Bateman tells Tilley about this cruel and shocking AIDS, quote, lie, end quote, and Tilley is obliged to say, quote, yes, oh, he's a terrible liar, end quote. But she knows that Bowery was not lying. What he had said was true. Quote, when you look at those pictures now, says Tilley, it's so weird, all those things going on behind them, end quote. Bowery learned he was HIV positive 6 years ago and told Tilley the same day. He had been tested 2 years before, he said, but had not collected the results. Now, he had opened a form letter that explained, casually, clumsily, that the hospital was checking on all its HIV positive patients. Oh man, what a way to find out. In the words of Seraph Wynne Evans, Bowery was a control freak, and there can be few faster ways to lose control than to become an object of worry. And there are other professional, sexual and social restrictions attached to the acknowledgement of HIV infection. So, Bowery told Sue Tilley and eventually his sister, but he told no one else. Quote, I kind of mothered him quite a bit, says Bateman, who learnt of Bowery's infection only when she visited him in hospital before Christmas and saw his fellow patients. Quote, the last thing he would have wanted was me looking after him all the time, not leaving the house, expecting him to fall down dead any minute, end quote. In the last year or so, he was sometimes quite ill, but Bowery would not let her call a doctor. Some people, including quite close friends, have made the assumption that Bowery shielded away from all support and medication. This is not true. He did, for a while, see a psychotherapist. Quote, Lucian, grandson of Sigmund, would die, said Bowery, if he knew I was going to a therapist. He hates them so much, end quote. Bowery took anti-pneumonia drugs and had T-cell counts. He discussed AIDS with his friends, although not his AIDS. Quote, he didn't want anyone to know that it was a theme specifically for him, end quote, says Richard Torrey. Quote, he hated the way Derek Jarman dealt with AIDS. Jarman was showing all the positive sides of AIDS where Leigh wanted to be able to show all the negative sides if he felt like it, end quote. Torrey once heard Bowery say to an AIDS worker, quote, don't try to give them hope. If you've got HIV, you die. That's it, end quote. In the last year or two of his life, Bowery worked with ferocious energy. He wanted to get more done. He wanted to convert, unequivocally, his celebrity into something that would last. The Freud paintings had met expectations, but also raised further expectations. However proud of them he was, he knew they were not his work. He was still in the flat, in the clubs, in the minicab routine. 2 years ago, Bowery joined with two others to form a rather extreme singing drag act called Raw Sewage. They played the gay clubs with some success, but Bowery was not satisfied. He felt it could be taken much further, faster. Quote, I saw the act as a fun thing, says another member of the trio, Sam Abraham, also known as Sheila Tequila. Quote, a nightclub novelty act, but I always got the impression Leigh was desperate for stardom and the trappings that go with it. What he was best at was entertaining people in a nightclub, but he wanted much more than that, end quote. When Richard Torrey proposed a more artful musical collaboration, Minty, Bowery switched to this with gusto, but because there was no time for further false starts, Bowery wanted to get Minty right. For a long time before they ever performed, Bowery engaged Torrey in very long discussions about the path his band should take and the path Bowery should take. Mark Smith of The Fall had said to Bowery, quote, you don't need all that makeup, end quote. And Bowery kept asking Torrey, quote, is that true? Do I need it all? End quote. He sat or stood for Lucy and Freud several hours a day and also worked for Rita Osbeck, the fashion designer. Bowery's advice, says Osbeck, was to say, quote, make it tighter, end quote, if something on the model was tight, or say longer if it was long, or shorter if it was short. The rest of the time he spent with Torrey in his flat in Soho, where their discussions were interrupted only when Bowery put his head out of the window to say, quote, "Look at them! Let's go and chase them!" end quote. Minty took to the stage for the first time in the drag club Madame Jojo's last spring. Matthew Glamour played keyboards and Nicola Bateman was curled under Bowery's outfit in readiness for her birth. If Bowery had in the past coupled disquiet to comedy, mockery to self-mockery, there was now something more urgent and less jolly going on, in which an almost panicked quest for stardom through outrage combined with an unacknowledged commentary on his illness. He was having his own surreptitious Derek Jarman career. Bowery's Minty act, with its proliferation of bodily fluids, seems in retrospect to have been taking on one of the great modern taboos, unsafe sex. It also featured an element of irresponsibility. The vomit and urine were fake, but the enemas were real, and on one occasion, Bowery accidentally sprayed his audience. Backstage, Bowery was as difficult as ever, quite cruel and violent. On stage, he would do the birth and the enema and sing a song describing a room full of corpses oozing blood in the room below. Minty played 10 times. The last time was in Freedom Cafe in Soho on Wednesday the 23rd of November. The following Monday, Bowery was admitted to hospital with AIDS-related meningitis. Quote, "Don't tell them I've died," Bowery told Sue Tilley. "Tell them I've gone to Papua New Guinea." He was not being entirely facetious. At all costs, Bowery wanted to withhold at least some of the truth for as long as he could. In the 5 weeks between his arrival in hospital and his death, it was the task of Tilley and when she had learnt the truth herself, Bateman, to act as news managers. They first had to keep the secret the fact of Bowery's hospitalisation, and then, when that became impossible, to keep people from visiting him because the ward and the other patients gave away his diagnosis. Bowery thought he would recover, and so did his friends. He rang Rita Osbeck, joking, quote, "Darling, I'm in a private clinic in Switzerland," end quote. After Christmas, when his condition worsened, a few people were told the full truth and were allowed to visit. These included Seraph Wynne Evans and Lucian Freud, and Bowery's father and sister, who happened to be travelling in Britain at the time. Quote, "It's not fair," Bowery said to Tilley. "I've got so much more to do. I just need 2 more years. I haven't finished," end quote. And then he died. Quote, "He was trying to say something," says Nicola Bateman, "but I couldn't quite catch what he was saying, and suddenly things started to come to a head. I was talking to him the whole time while he was dying. I was able to be there and hold his hand, and his father was there on the other side holding his hand. He knew that we were there, and he went, so that was good." It was New Year's Eve. Friends see some justice in the date, as if Leigh Bowery, who gave such a strange new resonance to the phrase fashion victim, had been properly recognised as the patron saint of the party. Lucian Freud paid for Bowery's body to be flown home to Australia, where he was laid to rest. The death of Leigh Bowery was registered on the 3rd of January 1995, where his occupation is listed as performance artiste, and cause of death being 1A, respiratory failure, B, pneumonia, and 2, cryptococcal fungal meningitis, the latter 2 associated as AIDS-related complications.
I really can't tell the difference between the stage and the street. It's been a problem which is sort of I sort of transformed myself, so it's sort of a theatrical sort of thing. Looking and trying to explain myself, that's a bit of a problem. I think the fact that I am, you should be very grateful for.
Get yourself along to the Leigh Bowery exhibition at the Tate Modern in London, which is on until the 31st of August 2025. And, or, do both if you can, but if you want to learn more about Leigh Bowery, then there is an amazing biography written by his longtime friend, who we've just heard of, Sue Tilley, titled Leigh Bowery, The Life and Times of an Icon, published by Thames and Hudson and widely available in all good bookshops, including Amazon. But let's end with Leigh Bowery in his own words, for within the Tate Modern exhibition was a collection of postcards Bowery had sent while on his travels. The postcards within the exhibition at the Tate Modern serve as a window into Bowery's mind and private life. The first postcard to longtime friend and the woman he later married, Nicola Bateman, who he affectionately refers to as, this is hilarious, Cola Manbait, where he writes, "Dear Nicola, having a fantastic time in Barcelona. The prostitutes are too brilliant. So a gorgeous live sex show for 100 pesetas, 50p. Miss you and wish you were here. All my love, Leigh," with 10 kisses. And in a postcard from Scotland from Leigh to longtime friend Sue Tilley, who I believe he refers to as Suet, he writes, "I had sex in the park with a man who said on completion, 'You're Leigh Bowery, aren't you?' I said, 'Guilty as charged.' He said, 'Are you always so slutty, so eager to please?' I said, 'What are you getting at?' He said, 'Nothing, you just seem so desperate, so hungry.' I said, 'You are my charitable act of the week.' He said, 'Ditto, you were mine.' I said, 'I don't think there's anything left to say.' He said, 'Except goodbye.' As he walked away, I shouted, 'I love you.'" You can check out and read all the newspaper articles mentioned in this episode, along with extra snippets of information, on the Extra T blog. You can find the link in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Until the next episode, you can find me on Instagram at The Lost Boys of Soho.